Welcome to St. Peter's Church, which is by a considerable way the oldest building in Petersfield. My name's Reverend Will Hughes and I'm the Vicar here, and we're just going to have a look around the building and some of the wonderful bits of this very, very ancient building. You can see behind me probably the finest bit, which is that beautiful great big arch. The arch and the pillars and some of the walls are about 900 years old. We think they were made in about the year 1160. I like to think that the builders could ask their grandfather what he might have done at the Battle of Hastings. It's a fantastically old building and a beautiful thing. Around the arch you can see some bits of stone that used to go up into a tower, because we think the tower of the church used to be there, whilst now it's at the west end behind you. The picture's pretty old and has been in the church for some time. It's a wonderful image of Christ calling the fishermen, and there are lots of surprises in it, like the fact the boat doesn't have any oars. The faces were done later and stuck in afterwards by the same artist, and we think he used faces of people who lived in and around Petersfield as his models. The sanctuary was redecorated in their inimitable way by the Victorians and has some fantastic tiles on the walls and on the floor. To one side you can see the little brass door behind which we keep the bread and wine of communion, and every week volunteers from the church take communion out to 10 or 15 different people who aren't able to make it to church, so they can receive in their homes. The windows behind the altar have some pictures from the life of St. Peter, who's the patron saint of our church and of our town. The brass lecterns in the shape of an eagle, most lecterns are, we keep the Bible on it and read from it to remind us that like an eagle, the word of God comes from high up in heaven and stoops right down to us here on earth. We don't use the eagle and the high altar as much as we used to, because we now use the nave altar, which has got a lectern of its own, but it is a beautiful thing. St. Peter's used to be a relatively dark building with wooden floors and dark wood pews and memorials all over the walls, but in 2000 it was reordered, and now the memorials are all in the side chapels, and the walls are beautiful and clean and bright. The floor was replaced with this lovely white stone, and the pews replaced with seats. We got the new altar and the lectern, which are both that beautiful pale wood, and now it's a light, bright and lovely building. You can see at the west end of the church the old roof line, where the roof used to be before they built the clear story of clear glass windows above it. I've always loved that the old roof line is just slightly off-centre, a reminder that God never does things in quite the way we expect him to. There are still some memorials on the walls, and one of them is in memory of William Loftus-Jones, who was Petersfield's very own Victoria Cross winner. He was the captain of HMS Shark and fought and died in the Battle of Jutland. There are a good few other memorials, including the Sumner one, which is not in memory of the lady who founded the Mothers' Union, but a close relative of hers. The porch of the church, which looks Norman but is in fact a Victorian replica, is in memory of her husband, John Sumner, who was the vicar of this church. The stained glass windows in the church, of course, are a great teaching aid to all of us of the different stories of the faith. And in the stained glass windows on this side, you've got a fairly recent one of St. Peter as the fisherman, wearing blue. There's a window in memorial of a teacher, which is the story of the parable of the sower, who sowed seed on the stony ground and on the good soil as well. There are windows to saints like St. Catherine and St. George and St. Michael, the head of the angels of God. And at the end of this chapel, in the children's corner, there's a window with stories from the life of Christ, including the crucifixion and the resurrection. The pricket stand's a place where people can come and light a candle whenever they want to, and there's a board next to it where people can write prayers, and the church will then join them in praying them. There are normally a good few candles lit at the end of every day. The wrought iron cross has just been redecorated and gilded by a kind donation from the church, and is looking really beautiful, the contrast between the black and the gold standing out. And the organ itself was revamped and improved considerably last year, again because of a kind donation from a member of the choir who left us a legacy when she died. It's now sounding fantastic, and we have all sorts of good concerts on it almost every week. The font dates from around the 1400s. You can see from the different bits of damage around the side that once upon a time it was set against the wall, so one of the faces is missing, and you can still see the places where the old hinges and lock were when it had a lid. It was buried in the churchyard for over 100 years and was found relatively recently and put back into the church. The chairs have allowed us to use the space in the church in all sorts of different ways, and one of the big spaces near the back we now use every week on a Thursday morning for our cafe, Refresh, where there's free cake and coffee and good homemade things, and we normally get a wonderful group of 50, 60, 70 people coming in, meeting and talking to each other and enjoying the homemade cakes the church provides. This is the Lady Chapel, where every morning and every evening a few of us meet and pray for the town and for the church and for the wider world as well. It's an important discipline that this church is prayed in daily now, as it has been more or less for 900 years solidly. Many of the memorials ended up in here, and there are some spectacular ones from families throughout history, most of whom seem to have died in battle. In the Lady Chapel is the Book of Remembrance, where anyone can have the names of someone they've loved who's died written, and we remember them in our prayers and turn the pages daily. Above it's a rather beautiful icon of Christ that was commissioned by the previous vicar, Jas Harris Evans. This is the parish meeting room, which at the moment is laden with things to sell at the fete, which we're having this Saturday. Lots of the memorials ended up in here, including a rather nice one about the setting up of a fund to feed the poor and the hungry of Petersfield. And there's a beautiful stained glass window to St. Monica, the mother of St. Augustine of Hippo, the patron saint of mothers with wayward sons. And owing to a complete accident of the reordering, she is reflected in the glass of the door to this meeting room, so she seems to hover over the nave of the church. St. Peter's is a beautiful and very historic church situated right at the heart of the town. It has a really important role, both as the home of the worshipping community, but also a reminder of the presence of God here in the middle of the busyness of the town and all the things we do. It's a special joy when the markets are on, as they so often are, that here is the church behind them, ringing out its bells, counting the hours, and reminding us all of God's presence in the busyness of our daily lives, as well as when we set time apart to pray. St. Peter's Church is, of course, a beautiful historic building, but much, much more than that. It's a living place, and the church is as much the people who come together here as it is the stones that surround them. We have a fantastic number of people coming in to be baptized, at least 8 every month at the moment, and it's a special joy to welcome couples here to be married as well. We have about 20 weddings this year. Next to me by the door is the incumbents board with a list of all the vicars of this parish since it was first made. I'm the 44th vicar in about 900 years, and it's wonderful to understand that I'm just one face in a long line of continual representing what God is for here in the town.